you aware of whether or not the Berkline site has received notices of violation since you become a commercial real estate agent?
Not till you mentioned it the other day.
You had no knowledge of that?
No. I knew that there had been a few problems, and that's why I had a meeting with Jeff Branham, I think Kenny Reed, and the owner. As far as notice of violations, I don't receive those. The owner, I don't get anything. Those don't go to me. So I didn't realize that there were any notices.
So whenever you had that meeting in July, or excuse me, when you had that meeting with Mr. Branham in July of 2011, it's your testimony that you were not aware that any notices of violation had been issued?
I don't recall a notice of violation having seen one. I knew that there were problems, and as far as the specifics, I just don't recall. It may have been mentioned at the meeting. I don't recall, but I knew we were trying to discuss some issues with site stabilization. That was the main function of the meeting.
Were you aware that FEMA violations had occurred at the site as of the date of your meeting with Mr. Branham?
I don't recall. That'd be a Mr. Corlew issue.
Mr. Corlew wasn't present at that meeting, was he?
No, but the FEMA issues, anything regarding engineering work, FEMA, anything like that, we've been saying Mr. Corlew was hired to do, not me.
You don't recall discussing those FEMA issues?
I don't recall a whole lot of that whole discussion. There was a problem with dirt site stabilization. There was a handful of issues that need to be resolved, and the owner, from my recollection, agreed to do certain things by certain dates, and I was out of it. I function on that property as a real estate broker. I'm not a consultant engineer because I'm not an engineer, and so I don't recall the exact specifics of it. I know you handed the minutes out last time, and so I didn't read them.
Take a minute to read those for me.
Okay.
The one she has marked doesn't have the same documents. I don't know why.
Okay, and your question?
The bottom paragraph, can you read that aloud?
Which one? The last one, Mr. Branham?
Yeah, that's it. The last one on the page.
Yeah, Mr. Branham noted that the site has received notices of violations related to site stabilization that will need to be closed very soon. The city will need to receive a corrective action plan, including dates or time frames for proposed corrective actions as soon as possible to avoid further action.
Okay. So, in fact, it was discussed in that meeting in which you were present that there had been notices of violation.
Well, as I told you, I do not recall the exact issues that were brought, but once again, site stabilization would be a notice of violation act. So apparently I was never given a notice of violation. So
your previous testimony was that you weren't aware that notices of violation had occurred. That's not an accurate statement.
I'm still not aware that a notice of violation had occurred. I told you I don't recall all the specifics of it. So
are those minutes of that meeting inaccurate?
Oh no, I think they're accurate.
Okay. So if those are accurate, then you did in fact have knowledge that notices of violation had occurred.
I guess.
Okay. You guess or yes?
I guess.
Would you agree with that?
No, I disagree.
Do you recall Mr. Branham discussing that FEMA violations had occurred during this meeting?
I don't recall.
Okay. if these documents, if the minutes of this meeting are accurate, do you dispute that?
No, I don't. Once again, that would be a Randy Corlew issue, so if it was mentioned, it wouldn't have been a concern to me, so I would not have stored it in my memory bank.
Okay. When it says Mr. LeBel and Mr. Kinley will discuss this issue with Mr. Corlew this week, and let the city know what time frames we can expect a work plan to resolve the FEMA Lomar application and floodplain modifications that have been made today. Is that a false statement?
I was involved in some meetings with Mr. Corlew, not all the meetings, and once again, I mean, that is not my area, that is not my profession, and so...
Okay. Let's go back step by step. I asked you earlier, do you recall the FEMA violation being discussed? Your response was, that's not my area. That would have been Mr. Corlew. The minutes of the meeting reflect that you took it upon yourself to go back to Mr. Corlew and discuss those issues. I read that accurately. Would you like to read it for yourself?
Oh, no, I know exactly what it says.
Okay.
I did not contract with Mr. Corlew, so, I mean, the bottom line is, that was not my issue. Now, Jeff and I, Mr. Kinley and I were there at the meeting. Now, if Jeff Branham construed that I was going to take this upon myself to handle, then, I mean, I'm sorry. That may be a misinterpretation of what was going on, but I go back to, I am not an engineer. My job is not to handle engineering. So
it's an easy question. I'm not asking if you're an engineer. I'm not asking if you're a lawyer. My question is, earlier, are the minutes of that meeting accurate? You said yes. I then asked you if you remember the FEMA issue being discussed. You said, that's not my area. That would have been Mr. Corlew. I then specifically read a paragraph in which you apparently took it upon yourself, you and Mr. Kinley, to go back to Mr. Corlew regarding the FEMA violation. Did I misstate any of that as it appears in the minutes?
You're stating exactly what is in the minutes. And I said the minutes appear. I did not dissect the minutes. I did not go try to subpoena witnesses on the minutes. The bottom line is this. This property has nothing to do with your BCA violations.
The bottom line is, you knew that notices of violations have occurred. You made false statements here today about that.
You can say I made false statements. I told you I did not do that. Yeah, do not interrupt. I have testified that I do not recall minute by minute what the transpired at that meeting. It's been, let's see, when was this? This was July 21st, 2011. What did you have for breakfast that day? Once again, you're in the same position I am on not...
No, I'm not in the same position. I'm asking the question.
Well, that's fine. July 21st, 2011. I do not recall those specific details of the meeting, word for word. I will take Jeff Branham. I think he's an honorable person. I will say these minutes are probably relatively accurate. Now, if Mr. Kinley and I go discuss with Corlew, I would dispute that contention. So, for the record, I do not recall.
Make sure you get it right this time. Yeah. This is the second version you've given.
That's fine. For the record, I do not recall word for word what happened at that meeting. And I will tell you that this is most likely fairly accurate. And I use the word fairly, so you can't keep calling me a liar.
Okay. You previously didn't qualify with the term fairly. You previously said they were accurate. You also previously said that you weren't aware notices of violations had occurred. That document states otherwise, right?
And I told you, I don't recall.
Okay. You tell me that now, but previously you said you didn't know if those occurred.
Well, I mean, you can act like Perry Mason, but I mean, the bottom line is
I don't have to be Perry Mason with you, sir.
I'll tell you right now, I do not recall, and that's what I have on the record.
Okay. You also said you weren't aware that FEMA violations had occurred.
I don't recall those
The minutes of that meeting reflect otherwise, correct?
I guess, but I still don't recall.